Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you had a good long weekend and celebrated appropriately for Canada Day. I can verify that the Russell Market was busier than ever for Canada Day, and that the Canada Day celebrations in Foley were extraordinary. Before we begin the formal part of the meeting, I want to acknowledge that we are in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe peoples in the Williams and Huron-Robertson Treaties area. We recognize the long history of First Nations and Métis peoples on this land and show respect to them today. We acknowledge our neighbors, the Wata Mohawks and the First Nations of Deer Point, Moose Deer Point, Shawniga, Wasasking, Magnetawan, Henvey Inlet, Nipissing, and the Dokies. So I'd like to draw your attention to two items on the addendum that you would have received at 2 o'clock. After 2, one adding a business item, 2 actually in business, one talking about Rail Safety Week, and another one, the appointment of Donna McLeod as acting deputy clerk, and one other item added to correspondence related to Perry Sound application for True North Cannabis. So with that addendum, could I have approval of the agenda? All in favor? Thank you. And is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? I see none, so we will proceed with the motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adopt the minutes of the regular meeting of council held June 20th, 2022 as circulated. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move that motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Coles.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor of approving the minutes? Thank you. And I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn the regular meeting to hold a public meeting for the following matters. Zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0009-H for Jacqueline, and consent application number B 2022-0007-H for Jacqueline, and consent application number B 2022-0008-H for Curtis. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner?
So moved.
And seconded by Councillor Finson.
I second that.
All in favor of moving into the public meeting? Thank you. That's carried. So you have before you 2 items about consent. Council will now hold public meetings for proposed consent and zoning bylaw amendment applications. In accordance with the Planning Act, Council will consider all matters placed before it prior to granting a consent or passing a zoning bylaw. If a person or public body who files an appeal of a decision of the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin in respect of a proposed consent does not make written submissions to the Council before it provides or refuses to provide a provisional consent, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. Anyone wishing to receive notice of the passing of a zoning bylaw amendment, not owning land within 120 meters of the area to which it applies,
join the meeting,
has not submitted such a request in writing, should provide your full name and address to the clerk. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Council to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. The purpose of consent application number B 2022-0007-H for Jacqueline is to create one new rural lot. The purpose of the associated zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0009-H for Jacqueline is to recognize deficient lot frontage of the retained lot and recognize deficient lot area of the severed lot and a reduced interior side yard setback from an existing shed. I now ask the clerk to state the method by which the notice of the meeting was provided and the dates on which that notice was provided.
Notice of the public meeting was provided by posting the property and by regular mail on June 14th, 2022. Notice was therefore considered provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Has the township received any correspondence with respect to these applications?
No correspondence has been received.
Has anyone registered to speak in favor of or in opposition to these applications?
No one has registered to speak to these applications.
I see we have Lauren on the call. Would you like to talk about it at all, Lauren, before I ask council if they have questions for you?
Sure, thank you, your worship. So this is an application to create one new rural lot just off of Macaulay Road. There's an associated zoning bylaw amendment that will recognize just deficient lot frontage of the retained lot and deficient lot area of the severed lot, as well as reduced setback to the existing shed. I'd be happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Does council have any questions for Lauren? I think it's pretty straightforward, and more lots might mean more houses. So good news. Okay, we move on to the second consent application. The purpose of the consent application number B 2022-0008-H for Curtis is to create one new rural residential lot. I now ask the clerk to state the method by which notice of the meeting was provided and the dates on which that notice was provided.
Notice of the public meeting was provided by posting the property and by regular mail on June 20th, 2022. Notice was therefore considered to provide in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act.
Has the township received any correspondence with respect to this application?
No correspondence has been received.
Has anyone registered to speak in favor of or in opposition to this application?
No one has registered to speak to this application.
And I think I see Jamie Robinson of MHBC on the call. Jamie, do you want to speak to this one a little bit before we ask for council questions?
Certainly, your worship. I don't have a whole lot to add. This is a rural lot creation application that's been reviewed in accordance with the policies that are contained in the official plan. And the application does conform to the various policies of the official plan. And we've outlined a number of conditions of provisional consent that are pretty standard, but the recommendation is that council approve the application.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Robinson? I see none. So we move on to the decisions. I have a motion that the public meeting held for the following matters is hereby closed and the regular meeting is hereby reconvened. Zoning bylaw amendment application number R 2022-0009-H for Jacqueline and consent application number B 2022-0007-H for Jacqueline and consent application number B 2022-0008 excuse me, H for Curtis. Excuse me. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move that motion, Mayor.
And seconded by Councillor Coles.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so I have two consents here related to the Jacqueline application. The first, a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby grant provisional approval to consent application number B 2022-0007-H for Jacqueline, subject to the conditions set out in the decision. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved.
And seconded by Counselor Fellner.
Second that, Mayor.
All in favor? Thank you. And the second part of this is a motion that bylaw number 2022-076, being a bylaw to amend Township of Seguin zoning bylaw number 2006-125, property roll number 4903-010-004-03700, application number R 2022-0009-H for 40 Macaulay Road is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson
I so move.
and seconded by Councillor Moffat?
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
All in favor? Thank you. And the second consent is a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby grant provisional approval to consent application number B 2022-0008-H for Curtis, subject to the conditions set out in the decision. Could I have a motion from Councillor Coles
I will so move.
and seconded by Councillor Osborne?
Second that.
All in favor? Thank you very much. So we move to the delegations, and I believe we have Rob Bosenworth here from Safe Quiet Lakes. Do we also have Crystal? No. Okay. Is Mr. Bosenworth, Rob, are you there?
Join is here, but he's muted. We just see.
Rob Bosenworth? We can see you're there, but I think you're muted. I don't know whether you can hear me.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can, yes, but we can't
Well-
see you.
Okay. Start video, how would that be?
Okay,
There we go.
okay. Well, welcome, Rob, and I will remind you that as a delegation, you have 10 minutes to present your information. Do you wish
Okay.
to screen share? We- Mm,
Your worship. Okay. Yep.
Rob, are you streaming the council meeting separately? Because I think what we're hearing is us as feedback.
All right, so two people are talking to me at the same time. First of all, I think you have, and I prefer if that came up and we went through that, I will ask you when to change it.
We have your full package in our agenda package, so we can follow along that way.
Oh, hold on. Yes, yep, sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
First of all, I think you have, I prefer if that came up.
Guys, sorry, I'll just give me a sec. I can't find the damn.
He also called in by phone.
Yeah, if you called in by phone or if you're watching the YouTube, turn that off and just use the Zoom.
Okay, how are we doing? Did my YouTube go off? I think it did.
That's better. Yep. And we have your presentation in our council package.
Well, why don't we just go through it that way, rather than me sharing screen, if that works for you.
Yep, you can tell us when to.
I will tell you when to page. So
So
let's
for
start.
counselors, that presentation starts on page 44 of your council package.
All right, so listen, thank you very much. Your worship and council, I am very pleased. This is the first time I've presented to Seguin. I've presented to quite a few other organizations and municipalities, but not Seguin. So thank you very much. But also, let me also start by your, I think it's many years of both moral support and financial support. You are one of our leading supporters, and I will probably thank you a number of times going through this presentation because it's very much appreciated. So on number 2, let me just talk. I'm sure you've seen this page before because we start our presentations with it all the time. But it basically says what we are about. And we are guided by our mission. The Boaters Code is a very strong representation of what our mission is. We treasure our lakes. We treasure it for our residents, for our visitors, all the various kinds of recreation users that we have on the lakes. We believe that the lakes are integral to our economy, and the environment is integral to our economy, much as this council does, and this township. So let me go to page 3. We are a data-driven organization. I think you must know that. We don't just do things because we think it's the right thing. We gather data. We had our 3rd survey. We did it in last summer. We broadened the base. We included Township of or Georgian Bay, and the Georgian Bay Association helped us. It is professionally done, and as it has always been, it's done by, we use a firm called Aaron Research, and they are supported by a professor and colleges from Algonquin College. So we had almost 6,000 responses. I think it was 5,900 and something. This, by any measure, is a very significant survey. And so the results can be relied upon as something that are strong representation of how our lake communities feel. It takes a long time to do it. It was about 8 months of work on it. It's all entirely volunteered. And you can see some of the results here of the breadth that we got. So Georgian Bay was a big ad. We stretched into most of central cottage country Ontario, so Haliburton and areas to the east of what we traditionally do. So let's go to the next page, Lake Survey Message. The key thing to get out of this survey is that people, I mean, it's not a surprise. Everybody loves these lakes and they want to preserve them. There are some disturbing trends. We'll talk about those in a minute. Noise and traffic are increasing, safety is down, and overall lake experience is decreasing because they are a function of noise, traffic, and safety. There are things that townships can do, but one of the most important things they can do is have thoughtful development programs, land development programs. And I think, I know Safe Quiet Lakes congratulates Seguin for being a leader in our area, particularly with your recreational carrying capacity. And I know you are considering applying that to bays, bays with, I think it's 60 meters of opening. And you've also had success at the OMB, which is a leading indicator of the strength of your policy. So that's one of the major influences that municipalities can have on the overall load on the lake. So let's go to the next page, number 5, strong consensus. 90% of the participants say that we have a responsibility to preserve the natural state of our lakes. I'm just reading off the chart because it's really important. And 90% is more than a consensus. I mean, consensus is in a democratic sense is more than 50. This is 90%. And it doesn't matter whether you're a power boater or not. Everybody believes that we all have a mutual responsibility for. And it's as closest to unanimous as you can get. The next page. So let me just talk about the key concerns. So the safety has to do with boats and PWCs, not following the rules and going at high speeds and creating wakes. These are big issues. Wakes is also, it's number 3 too. But, and boats going too close to shore in spite of the fact that we have speed limits close to shores. Unwanted noise, the leading cause of unwanted noise is PWCs driven by boats with loud exhausts. And finally to that is boats with loud speakers. And of course, new and, well, not new, but growing concern is the emergence of wake surfing. Wakeboarding was created some wake, but wake surfing by definition creates as big as waves as they can. And I think we are all well aware of the dangers that is creating to the wildlife, the erosion of shoreline, and damage to personal property, and risks to paddlers and kayakers. There's some just horror stories of people being thrown out of their kayaks or being thrown up against the dock. If you've ever seen a boat parked parallel to the direction of the wave, when a wake surfer's wave comes in, an 18-foot boat will be lifted 2 or 3 feet and slammed into the side of the dock. It's frightening to watch. So this is a big problem. It's not just a problem in our lakes. It is a problem anywhere in North America where you have large lakes. So the trends, I want to keep within our 10 minutes here. There's a huge perception that the traffic is increasing. I think COVID, we all know that COVID is a contributor to that. But over half the people think that safety levels have gone down. And this is in a period from 2014 to 2021, or 7 or 8 years, a very short period of time. More people are paddling and the boats are getting bigger. An interesting thing is that whereas sea-doos are the biggest contributor to noise and a significant contributor to safety, they represent 5% of the boats on the lake. Increased readiness for legislation, number 8. So here's some stats that there are some graphs that talk about the numbers, and you can see there. This is what that shows that people are ready for what they'd like to see in terms of how things get changed. You can see the numbers there. This is what we do: increase education and communication. They feel that's gone from 66 to 83%. They want more enforcement on our lakes, and that's gone up quite significantly. But equally important is either the addition for more regulations or for more enforcement has gone down very significantly, from the low 30s to the high teens, which is not an insignificant number. One of my favorite topics I'll talk about in a minute is 2/3 of the people want the illegal above exhausts policed, and 2/3 want decibel limits on boat motor noise. Our action plan, so that's foil number 9. Our methods are outreach and education, advocacy and research, and building partnerships. And I think we've talked about this every time we come to see you. We work with marinas, and mainly marinas and lake associations, but also the municipalities and the police to help get our message out about safety, noise, boat traffic. Advocacy and research, we are doing more and more of that now. And I'll talk about it in a minute, the 2 main projects, which are wakes and excessive noise. So we're doing a lot of advocacy on that. We're learning a lot. And of course, we build partnerships with all of these associations and organizations around our lake. How do we do that? How do we make that happen? Again, these are not new programs, so I won't spend a lot of time on them, but we do distribute our material, which is our cards, around all the territory. I don't know exactly how many, but it's many, many marinas. We have people who drive around and do that, and they all participate. We have the boaters codes up at hundreds of marinas. We have a renter's postal code that we're giving to the rental agencies to give them guidance on what is appropriate behavior on our lakes, so you can be respectful. Our digital reach is now over 4,000. We've run a number of websites or Zoom webinars, both in last year and 2020 with very successful rates of attendance. We ran our last two stakeholder meetings by webinars, and we get quite a bit of media coverage as well. So that's how we get our outreach. But now let me just talk about our two major projects where we're trying to make some significant change here. The first one is with wakes, and we have the Be Wake Aware campaign, which we did in concert with the MLA and FOCA. There's a video out, a very good, thoughtful, not in your face, but just a thoughtful video. We got wake signs that go, the people are asking for them all around. Anybody that knows about them want our no wake signs. We've got the radar device that we work with the MLA. We've got a couple of years of data down now in Mirror Lake in south of Port Carling, and we've really made a difference there. And that's Wakes of Speed. And there's a lot more that coming on that, because we're starting to do the research. We have some research programs going on right now to establish scientific basis for limiting wake surfing. And we're already talking to Transport Canada about that. So that will take many years, but we will get there. This is my baby, the Decibel Coalition. We've been working for 2.5 years. We've hired a government relations firm, and they do communications as well. So we're spending a lot of time and effort and money to make this happen. I'm very sure that we will get some decibel limits. This is a Canada-wide program, so the Decibel Coalition is across Canada. We've got 64 members, including 8 or 9 municipalities, including Seguin, thank you, and numerous, 55 to 60 lake associations from BC to Quebec. This has been a big project, and I think we got another 2 years before we get there. There is nobody actively saying that we shouldn't do this. We had, I got to remember the numbers, 2,000 people responded on the Transport Canada webpage, and 89% of them are in support of decibel limits. So Transport Canada has got the message. We've been sending, I think we've sent 500 letters to individuals have sent 500 letters to about 120 politicians. I don't have the exact numbers, but very effective campaign. And we've learned a lot about how to make change at the national level, which is where most of the laws that affect our lakes have to be made. So those are the two programs. Let me just talk about, how important it is that we work with the municipalities such as yours. We have your full support. So I know I'm preaching to the converted here. You help us with getting the safety message out. You help us getting the signs up in your townships. We are working with the organizations in your lakes. Thank you, I guess, as I told you I was going to thank you more than once. So let me just stop there. I hope I've covered everything, and I hope it's been less than 10 minutes, and ask if there's any questions.
I see some hands up. So Councillor Moffat, you're first.
Thank you, Mayor. Rob, 2 bigger picture items and 1 smaller one. The Decibel Coalition, how much are you advocating for EV boats to eliminate noise?
Well, explicitly, we're not. I think the market is going to drive that. So the answer.
Would you not think that would be good to try to align Safe Quiet Lakes and the Decibel Coalition with? Well,
very much so, but we have a very narrow focus, Councillor Moffat. This is a small piece of legislation that can be changed very quickly, and it addresses the current, boat population that we have that is not obeying the rules. The other trend, of course, is the trend to outboards from inboards, and outboards, for the most part, by their nature, by the way they're built, are much quieter and don't create excessive noise. We're not saying there can't be noise. Of course there has to be. It's the excessive noise, the ones that rattle the wine glasses on your shelf as they go by.
So the other bigger picture, I look at your survey, and as you referenced, Georgian Bay area is a big piece of that. However, your mission continues to be make the Muskoka Lakes safer. I personally think you're cutting your nose off to spite yourself, and I think you could drop that comment about Muskoka and make lakes safer, given that you've extended out your survey and such, and you're working more than just in Muskoka. And I don't want an answer. I'm just stating the obvious, that I think the Safe Quiet Lakes could expand out. My last small question on.
Well, if I can just interject there.
Sure.
It is something that we are very well aware of, that the things we have learned so far and our capabilities we realize have value far beyond Muskoka.
Right.
It's a matter of resource, both financial and human. The Decibel Coalition has taught us a tremendous amount about how to work nationally. And so now we have, we've got, I can't remember, 20, 30 lake associations in central BC who know about us. So it may come one day. We do talk about it. We realize that there is value for that.
And my last little question, in the slide of trends, where it talks about paddlers, it talks about towers account. I'm not sure if that's a spelling mistake, or I don't know what. It must be
a spelling mistake. Sorry.
I don't know what towers account for. It says 6%.
Oh, towers. Sorry, that would be speaker towers.
Oh, okay.
Wakeboards, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I am not looking at the foil, but I think that's what it means. Speaker towers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rob.
All right.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Rob. Good evening. I would think that towers might be referring to towers, like water skiers.
It could be towers or doors, but in the end, it's the same thing.
All right.
Yeah, and one thing that is an interesting point when it comes to towing, the transport. Does council know what a VOR is? A vehicle operation. It's called a VOR, and these are rules that Transport Canada can apply to specific areas of lakes and lakes. So VORs you often address and they say, this lake cannot have any motorized vehicles. The 9 kilometers around our shores is a VOR, but there is also a VOR that restricts, that can be applied to not allow towing sports. So the Indian River, the Joe River, the Muskoka River have a VOR that does not allow any tow sports, including wake surfing. And it's a possible way that we may be able to get areas around the lake that are not, that tow sporting is not allowed. So we could expand it from the rivers to other places like 200 or 300 feet from shore, because it takes, actually it should be 400 or 500 feet. These wake waves take up to 600 feet before they dissipate to something regular in size.
Yeah, I understand that. And typically when you're towing a skier or a surfboarder, you are making a maximum wake from the boat. So I wanted to just reflect on Councillor Moffat's comment there about your mission statement. I too agree. Make Muskoka Lake safer. Inquire. That mandate, I think you need to amend your mission statement, because Muskoka is not all of Ontario. I know they get all the limelight.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to Ontario than Muskoka. My first question I had was, you've been in the Safe Quiet Lakes has been in business for 9 years, roughly 13.
I think it's 2011 to 22. So yeah.
Okay. So in the last 10 years, we've got more noise and traffic and less safety. So I'm thinking that's quite a contradiction to your mission, right? Because the mission is to reduce the traffic and the noise and increase the safety. So I wonder, sliding over to another slide where it talks about people want more patrol of the lakes, increased education, enforced boating. Well, okay. But at the same time, these same people are saying there's no need for additional regulation. you can't have it both ways.
Well, no,
If you're
the
gonna
no-
make it safer, you gotta have increased regulation. So they seem to want it both ways. I want my big boat, but I don't want the rules to apply to me.
no, the charts say that there is very much so an increased support for more regulations. The support, the group that say we don't think we need any more regulations, it has dropped from something like 31 to 18%. And the
Oh, so it's the
percentage of
opposite.
people believing that we should.
Oh, okay.
It's
thank
the
you for that.
opposite. Yes, absolutely. Everybody
Opposite.
wants more regulations. They want more attention, and they want more education, and they
Yeah.
want these
Okay.
problems to be addressed.
The, on your page.
And you know,
On
in
your
the
way-
end, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, you know, we work very closely with the police, and you cannot enforce your way to broad adaptation of these of addressing these issues. You must do it ultimately through education and advocacy, but you can't do it, as we know, with noise, unless you also have in some instances like noise, you've got to have regulations behind, because you can use it. The carrot is the best way to get there, but occasionally you need to stick to.
Yeah, and as a member of the provincial police advisory board, there's not the resources to cover all these lakes. They're pretty busy in Parry Sound. The last point I had here was year-over-year data shows, radar shows 20% fewer exceeded the 9 limit. Does that include PWCs or just boats?
No, we can't. When we capture the data, we can't tell. So it includes both.
Because I've noticed on my lake, and we've only got about 70 or 80 residents, buildings on our lake, there's 5 or 6 new personal watercraft this year alone that there wasn't here last year. Now, these people didn't get rid of their boats. They've got their boats and the PWC because they want it all. So now it's kind of a double up thing happening. But I think in order to do any of the regulations you're advocating for with the federal government, Transport Canada, they're going to have long discussions with the industry, with the private sector, the manufacturers, etc. And hopefully, as Councillor Moffat mentioned, there will be an evolution towards electric powered boats, which could be faster and quieter. But anyway, that's my comments. Thank you for your work. Appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. I can shed a little bit of light on the towers. Many wakeboard boats have towers for the attachment for the wakeboards. So they might be music towers or they might be wakeboard towers. They're a different type of boat that they're referring to there. Councillor Coles, you have a question.
Quickly, Bob, and thank you for your presentation. I just was curious, you did mention that the initiatives from Safe Quiet Lakes are market driven, but I'm curious what kind of responses you've had from the boat manufacturing sector.
The one generally, so that we work with the National Marine Manufacturers Association. They are very oriented towards safety. They do not want to have products that are creating unsafe environments. They also do not want to have products that make noise, because then people call and complain. And there's, in the United States, I mean, you know, in the 80s, people started to complain about loud boats in the US, and it's at a state level there, so it's easier to change. So basically any state in the US that has significant waterways, with the exception of Florida, have decibel limits. And once you got decibel limits, then you got the police can do something about it. And now you fix the problem. We've worked with about half a dozen enforcement agencies in the US, and it's doesn't eliminate the problem, but it brings it down to something bearable.
Right. Yeah, I've noticed on our lake, the PWCs still make lots of noise, but generally the motorboats are quieter. Over the last couple of years, the ones with the loud mufflers don't seem to exist as much as they previously did. So
You have
that's good.
You have a particular candidate in North Rosso who has a very large performance boat. And my understanding is that he shipped the boat away and had a form of muffler on. And when he goes past my place, he's much quieter than he used to be. So and there's no decibel limits yet. So you can make change.
Good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Rob. You know that Safe Quiet Lakes has got a soft spot in my heart. And I applaud what you're doing, and I applaud the contributions of Aaron Research. These are extensive pieces of data, and I applaud the fact you're doing it. And I know how hard it is to get in front of Transport Canada to get rules changed, but keep up the good work, and I think it will make a difference in the long term. So thank you very much for your time and your presentation and your work.
Again, thank you for your support, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I think we will move to item 6B, which you have a very large presentation in your council package, the asset management plan, which has been presented to us by Hemson. And I believe we have Christopher and Andrew to present. Who's doing the talking? Both of you?
I will. Christopher Ballet here from Hemson.
Okay, Christopher, we have the presentation in our package. Do you want to screen share as well?
I can share my screen, yes.
Okay. You have 10 minutes, but I understand this is a pretty substantive presentation, so just keep it moving for us.
Sure thing. Bear with me 1 second just to set up here. I believe that should be sharing now. So thank you, members of council and the mayor, for today's opportunity to speak to you on the asset management plan. My name is Christopher Ballet. With me today is Andrew Maramella, senior consultant, also from Hemson Consulting. So to kind of start things off in terms of what we're going to discuss today, we're going to look at a bit of the background and objectives of the asset management plan, the state of the local infrastructure, outlining the condition and the replacement value of the infrastructure, as well as looking at the cost implications associated to the township's infrastructure through the financing strategies, and as well as capping off with some next steps. In terms of the background, municipalities are responsible for ensuring infrastructure is planned, built, and maintained in a sustainable way. The township has applied sound asset management principles and processes to date. The asset management plan is a useful tool for identifying long-term infrastructure requirements. And that said, one of the key requirements is meeting the requirements of Ontario Regulation 58817, which is Ontario's new sort of asset management regulation. It is also important to have a readily available document to support future provincial and federal grant applications, particularly the CCBF, which is formerly known as the gas tax, as well as your OCIF funding agreements. In terms of where the township is now, in terms of the regulatory timeline, the township did complete a strategic asset management policy back in 2019, as well as in terms of the asset management plan today, we are looking at the existing levels of service, as well as completing the levels of service for core and non-core assets. In the coming years, we are looking to complete the proposed levels of service out to 2025. Apologies, just have a bit of a sorry about that, just my throat here. Did you lose screen share? Sorry about that.
Yeah, we did lose your screen share.
I can follow along though.
We have
Sorry,
we
1
have
second.
your presentation in our package. So if you tell us what slide you're on, we can follow through.
Give me 1 second. Sorry, technical problems here.
We can see it now again. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. In terms of the AMP and regulatory objectives, we are looking at identifying the current state of the infrastructure, the quantity, the age, condition, and replacement of the assets, as well as identifying the current levels of service based on the requirements of the regulation. We are looking at a 30-year timeframe in terms of the plan, so out to 2051, and we are looking to account for all the costs associated to the township's infrastructure. In terms of the total asset value, The township owns about $314 million of infrastructure. Most of that infrastructure is made up of roads, about 75% or $233 million. Buildings makes up about 14% or $43 million, with vehicles making up about $14 million, with the balance of the infrastructure being made up with bridges and culverts, land improvements, equipment, and other infrastructure which include parking lots, septic, stormwater management, and furniture and equipment. In terms of the condition of the infrastructure, on average, the infrastructure is considered to be in fair condition. Most of the infrastructure, or a third of the infrastructure, about 28%, or $90 million, is in very good condition. About 109 million, or 35%, is considered to be in poor or very poor condition. The balance, 37%, or $160 million, or are considered in fair condition. Most of the infrastructure that weighting, which is in fair condition, is really related to the township's roads, as you can see in this graph here, which shows the condition of the individual asset categories and the condition shares. So the top sort of percentages there that you see are the percentages associated to the total share of the infrastructure in dollars. 74% is made up of the roads, which is the driving force or the driving factor behind sort of the fair condition assets that you saw in the previous graph, with the balance of the assets really being driven by buildings and vehicles, making up 14 and 4%. So really, a lot of the roads in the township are in that mid-range sort of fair or poor condition, based on, and that those conditions are based on the condition assessments kept by the township on a 5-tier scale. One important point that I'd like to make here is that any infrastructure considered in the orange or red may not be necessarily related to infrastructure that's breaking apart or failing, but it is infrastructure that needs to be looked at a bit more closer or needs to be reviewed in more detail. That said, we have developed a financing model as part of this plan in order to undertake exercises of updating some of the conditions. If there are any inspections that are done more on the ground, they can be updated through the model to update this information. So just something to keep in mind. In terms of the full life cycle model and understanding the full costs of undertaking the 30-year investment or investment costs associated to the infrastructure, we account for several different components of the life cycle of the infrastructure. We include non-infrastructure solutions, capital renewal replacement, operations and maintenance, asset disposal, and expansion. The second, third, and fourth points are sort of a bit self-explanatory. That said, the first point there, non-infrastructure solutions, are made up of costs associated to undertaking management of infrastructure, but not necessarily related to direct work on the assets. So things such as undertaking of studies, asset management software, things that are related to managing the infrastructure for the township, but not necessarily related to work directly on that infrastructure. Expansion activities at the bottom is related largely to growth-related infrastructure. That said, the township of Seguin is expecting some growth to occur in future years. There may be some need for additional growth-related infrastructure. That said, without understanding the full detailed implications of what that growth-related infrastructure is, there is a cost provision included for expansion-related activities in order to have sort of a placeholder in order to account for some of those costs in future years when better information is available. The full life cycle cost of over the 30-year period is about $332.6 million, which include all the cost components in that first bullet point. So in terms of comparing that to the available funding, the $332.6 million in total life cycle costs over the 30-year period is included in that first bar. The second bar looks at the current funding availability of $161.3 million, which is made up of the current budgeted capital available funds, both tax funded of about $2.2 million, as well as other grants related to the CCBF or the gas tax of about $280,000, and $393,000 from other grants such as the OCIF and the NORD funding. If those levels of funding were to continue into the future at similar levels today, that would make up to 161.3 million. That said, that would leave a gap or a 30-year funding gap of about 171.3 million relative to the $332.6 million. So in essence, what we're saying here is that maintaining the current levels of funding or maintaining funding at similar levels as today would leave a gap over the long-term period. Over the short term, although the township can undertake the works required in order to maintain the infrastructure, every year that infrastructure is, or every year that the funding does not increase, begins to accumulate this gap over into the period to 2051. Recognizing that a funding gap will form or theoretically is expected to form over the long-term period, we wanted to look at some additional financing strategy options in order to be able to manage that funding gap. The green line there, the last point in the table, which represents maintaining current funding levels, represents the current or the future cumulative infrastructure deficit, which is the 170 or so million that was presented in the previous graph. So over the period, if funding increases were not undertaken and the works in order to maintain infrastructure repair and replacement are to be undertaken, this would create the cumulative infrastructure gap over the period. That said, recognizing that there are some sustainable options in order to manage the funding gap, strategy one looks at closing the in-year funding gap by 2041, which is a 20-year period. What that means is increasing available funding year over year in order to meet the annual average funding needs, and that outlines the implications on the cumulative gap over that period. That would be strategy one, that red line. That would equate to an increase of just under $300,000 per year. That is a revenue requirement equal to about 2.3% of the township's estimated 2022 tax levy revenue of just under $13 million. Strategy two, which is the gold line there, represents closing the in-year funding gap by 2051, which would represent an increase of about $200,000 per year over the 30-year period. That $200,000 is about 1.5% of the $13 million estimated township tax levy. So one important point here is that the aim of the financing strategies is not to close a cumulative infrastructure deficit over the immediate term, recognizing that would likely not be a feasible option for the township. However, over the 30-year period, we want to look at managing the infrastructure deficit over that time period. This is an approach that is more manageable, and particularly other municipalities similar to Seguin are undertaking. Most municipalities do have an infrastructure deficit, if not all, across Ontario. But a more sustainable financing option would be to manage that infrastructure deficit over the long term. With that said, in terms of finalizing and some next steps, we do want to finalize the report and model based on any input we received today. We are providing the township with our Microsoft Excel financial model developed as part of the analysis. There is an update expected of the asset management plan in a future year in 2025 associated to the regulatory timeline to maintain proposed levels of service. So the township will need to keep track of the levels of service over the next few years. We'll need to update the inventories as needed over the next few years in order to have the information for that time, as well as monitor the conditions of assets over the long-term period. As always, Hempson is available to assist the township along that asset management continuum. I think that covers most of the presentation here in that time. Apologize for the bit of a hiccup there at the start, but I'll be able to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Before we take questions, I'd like to put the motion on the table that I have in front of me, that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adopt the Township of Seguin Asset Management Plan attached to this resolution as Schedule A. Could I have a motion by Councillor Osborne
So moved.
and seconded by Councillor Fellner?
Second that, Mayor.
Thank you. And now I will take questions. First from Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Mayor. Christopher, I'm just trying to find out, you mentioned about other municipalities in the province that are in a deficit. Is there a legal or regulatory requirement to fund the deficit, or is it just a best practice recognizing that you have assets that are being used and need to strategize or plan for fixing, replacing, upgrading, etc.?
Sure thing, through the mayor. So there is no specific regulatory requirement in order to fund or reduce to the deficit to a certain level. However, that said, there are minimum maintenance requirements for roads. There are other regulatory requirements for other infrastructure, fire vehicles, etc., that need to be maintained to meet those requirements. So it is part of the responsibility of the township in order to fund additional capital infrastructure. However, council has the discretion to decide what that level should be over any time period.
So just as a follow-up then, so out of that number, a certain amount of it as a result of other regulations would require to be funded. The other would be more of a discretionary top up or whatever. Am I correct to summarize that way, Chris?
Through the mayor, so that would be correct. It is a discretionary sort of top up. With that said, though, for infrastructure, which may not necessarily have direct regulatory implications, without additional funding, that infrastructure, would begin to deteriorate over the longer time period. Particularly for buildings or vehicles, and then additional funding would be needed in order to repair or replace that infrastructure over the long term. So once again, it's not a specific regulatory requirement, but it comes down to the responsibility of the township to maintain those services and those service levels.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your time, Christopher.
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mayor. Good presentation, Christopher, as best you could in layman's terms, I'm sure. Well understood. Correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that over the next 30 years, given the fact that our funding is maintained as it has been historically, that we'd have a gap of 171 million, which reflects, I believe, $5.7 million a year to close that gap. Am I correct in assuming that?
Right, through the mayor. So the analysis, the total life cycle costs associated to the infrastructure. So it would be everything that on the cost side, it's everything related to repair, replacement, and maintenance, as well as expansion sort of activities related to growth, would come up to that 332.6 million. Right. Today's funding level, so based on the sort of the 21 budget and 2022 budgets, the tax supported capital is about $2.2 million. You add some of the grants that have been provided to the township from gas tax, as well as other sources such as the OCIF. If we were to carry those same levels out over the 30-year period without any additional increases, so you just keep them flatlined, the total 30-year funding would be 161.3 million, which would leave that gap of 171.3 million by the end of the 30-year period. So the gap would continue to grow, gradually over the first few years until it reaches that 171 by 2051.
So is it safe to say, because we're here on 4-year cycles, not 30-year, that this council and the upcoming new council is going to be looking at an annual of somewhere in excess of 5 million a year gap, short gap, right? On an annual basis?
Through the mayor, to put it in simple terms, that would be accurate. Yeah. That said, the asset management plan is the study of multi-generational infrastructure. Right. The infrastructure is here today, but will be here 30, 40, 50 years from now. So it is looking at studying and looking at the infrastructure conditions over a very long time period in order to be able to get a bit of a better handle on what the long-term implications are.
Right. Okay, my last point here was, I understand our poor rating, poor to very poor on some roads in the area. I was concerned about the vehicles, the 14% in the poor area. Could you elaborate on what's wrong with our vehicle assets, please?
Sure, through the mayor. The vehicle infrastructure or the vehicle assets are generally assessed on the age of the vehicles. So the older a vehicle is, it would tend to fall into that very poor, that orange and red category. That said, it may not be necessary. It's not necessarily true that the vehicle is, completely broken down and, won't move. It is a reflection that the vehicle should be assessed more frequently or maintained more frequently in order for it to be able to continue operating efficiently. There are some fire vehicles in the township that are a bit older. That said, we have moved them up to either the fair or very good condition, recognizing that even though they're older, there are some pretty strict regulatory requirements associated to maintaining those fire vehicles, so they are in better condition than their age would suggest. Another point I'll add is that vehicles tend to have a shorter useful life. And through that cycle, you'll see, vehicles that are older and some that are newer, and they'll come up, sort of in that orange and red condition, right?
Okay, the reason I ask that is I believe we have a policy, a replacement policy every 5 years or so for most of our vehicles. And I'm just surprised that we fell into that category, given that 5-year replacement policy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're getting some bad information in the past. I don't know. Thank you very much for your help. Appreciate your presentation.
I see your hand up, Andrew, but before I acknowledge you, our Chief Administrative Officer would like to speak to Councillor Osborne's point.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Councillor Osborne, you bring up a really interesting point. Currently, staff are reevaluating a fleet policy that would see a more appropriate life cycle in place. The unfortunate reality is we do have some rather aged equipment that is driving that number. So we're currently evaluating a new policy. I don't have a timeline I can offer, but we will be bringing a new fleet policy to council in the not too distant future.
Great. Thank you for that.
Andrew, you had something to add.
Yeah, thanks through the mayor and through the chair. I just as a follow-up to both those points, the age-based assessment is, in what our review is, kind of on the lower end of a maturity scale of it. And as the municipality advances their asset management practices, you'll be able to better condition that with actual on-the-ground data, which will help improve that weighting to it. So as Christopher mentioned, we did apply some of that methodology to certain vehicles within it, but it would have to be a little bit more widespread, and that might fix some of that issues. In addition to that, we just need to be cognizant of the asset management is a point in time analysis, and there could very well be a vehicle up for replacement. That coincides with some of your policies and some of the directions of your capital budget, which may not have been taken into consideration at the time the plan was prepared, which again might kind of reinstate that replacement schedule and change that weighting from very poor to good for some of those categories. So that was my only comment to that.
Thank you. And I see a question from Councillor Fellner.
Yes. Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, this question would be for Andrew. And Andrew, thank you for the presentation. A very good presentation, I think. And I wanted you to comment. Recently, there's been some articles in the newspapers. Quite recently, one in the Globe, where there seems to be a trend to categorize natural capital as an asset class, where municipalities are sort of leaning towards, okay, what are our lakes and wetlands, forests, what are they really worth? What do we have to invest in them to keep them at their present value? I think is generally what it's about, but there seems to be a growing trend in municipalities, particularly in the West Coast, I think, sort of leading the charge. But being that this township is very much here because of our natural assets, I'm just wondering how that should play into our we're talking about a 30-year strategy here. So I'd just like to get your sort of comments on this.
So through the mayor, that's an excellent question and observation. So there's very few municipalities at this stage, at least in Ontario, that are really trying to capture the natural assets. We are getting to some GTA communities which are looking at trees and evaluating those and bringing them into the asset management plans. But I would say it's still probably at the smaller scale, but it's a very real item that might need to be taken into consideration. But we do have to be cognizant of, when we talk about asset management, it's really looking at making sure that we're capturing the assets that the township and the services that you provide and the ones that you're responsible for funding. So if you are actually deploying your capital dollars to maintaining those assets and doing work on them, then to that extent, we should be looking at them for consideration in the plan. But if some of the assets are provincial or federal responsibilities, and you're not really managing it from an asset perspective, then we may have to make some of those distinctions. Might be something to consider in future plans. I think this is kind of the first take at a more robust plan, and there's obviously a couple more years to go before you get to the 2025 deadline, and then it's kind of still monitoring and updating it from that point. But I would say that that's something that we can look at in the future and through the staff to make sure that you actually are managing those assets and how we can incorporate those costs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just have a bit of a question. I'm a real proponent of asset management, and I wonder if we as a township have the digital infrastructure to have real live asset management. As we fix a road, can we immediately up its standard from poor to good? Or what do we need to leverage this information on a, what do I call it, on a live basis, on a going basis? Do we have that?
Sure, I can speak to that. In terms of you know, sort of updating the information on sort of a live basis, we have developed an Excel-based model that does include an ability to update the conditions of the infrastructure based on the 5-tier scale that's presented here. So everything from the good or very good to the very poor. So if those works are completed, they can be updated through that model. That said, I don't want to sort of exaggerate the capabilities of what's being done here. In terms of the maturity level of sort of the assessments or the condition assessments that have been undertaken, you know, they are based on a 5-tier scale, but the township is expecting to move forward as sort of outlined in the asset management plan report before you in order to undertake some additional analysis on the roads to identify not just the condition of the roads, but to identify any needs or deficiencies that need to be undertaken to whether modernize the roads or update the roads to a particular level. So that work is expected to be taking place not over the short term. It is a long-term process where that would need to go into that in order to be able to do something a bit more complex in order to get live condition assessments for this information.
Thank you very much. I look forward to when we can actually do that on a live basis, because that would move us towards leveraging this information. But I truly appreciate the work you've done. Attached to the motion I have in front of me is the full asset management plan, which is interesting. And I really encourage the councillors to read it in depth. So we have a motion on the table to accept it in its fulsome. All in favor of doing so? I can't see all the hands. Actually, could you take down your screen sharing so I can see all the councillors as they vote? Okay, all in favor of the motion. Thank you, and that is carried. And I appreciate the work, Christopher and Andrew. It's a big tackle. So thank you very, very much. I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby receive the staff reports as presented on the agenda for the July 4th, 2022 meeting of council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson?
I so move.
And seconded by Councillor Moffat.
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
All in favor of receiving the staff reports? Thank you. And I have a motion that as per the recommendation of staff report number TR 2022-011, the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby authorize an increase of $700,000 to the existing approved $2.5 million loan to the Perry Sound Area Municipal Airport for the runway project. Could I have a motion from Councillor Coles?
I will so move.
and
motion.
seconded by Councillor Osborne.
Second,
Okay, thank you. And are you going to speak to it or Michelle? Michelle, could you speak to this for us? It starts on page 159 of your agenda package.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. As you recall, the request came from the Airport Commission at the last council meeting, and council directed staff to come back with a recommendation. The report from Tatham Engineering outlines the just under $1.4 million that the airport is requiring for completing the project. The large part of the increase is due to the fuel price index, which is affecting both the cost of diesel that the contractor is using and will affect the cost of asphalt. So right now, what they're asking for is a $700,000 loan from the town of Perry Sound, as well as an increase of $700,000 to the $2.5 million that Seguin has already approved.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor. So Michelle and I have been back and forth. My question is, in the airport's books, once all this work is done, has there been a cash flow analysis completed for the Airport Commission demonstrating that they could pay back 3.2 or 3.9 million, whatever it is that they borrowed from the town of Perry Sound, if applicable, or the township of Seguin?
Yes.
And it's done on a good, better, and best type of analysis in the event of interest rate changes or operational changes and stuff like that.
There was a sensitivity analysis done on the 2.5.
Yep.
It was done a couple of years ago, so I haven't looked at it recently. But the Airport Commission is quite confident that the extra revenue that they're going to be receiving as a result of this runway is going to allow them to completely pay both the principal and interest to Perry Sound and Seguin.
So you mentioned, sorry, Mayor, just to follow up, you mentioned it was completed a couple of years ago, or
that was when we did the $2.5 million one. I know they've also done one on the additional 1.4. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay.
But definitely they are.
Sorry, I just wanted to confirm that there's been an updated analysis, given
Yes.
that there's been a lot of moving parts that have occurred in the last short period of time. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
and thank you, Mayor. So Michelle, I noticed on page 162, it talks about on 1.25, on 2.225, and on 3.2. So there's variable interest rates here that may apply depending on what, Bank of Canada and Prime, et cetera?
If you'll recall, when council approved the 2.5 million, the terms were not actually set in stone. So what council will do is at the end of the project, when we know exactly how much the mortgage is going to be, we will then calculate based on, when we did talk about the 2.5, we talked about either the interest rate that we were getting on our bank account or the TD composite prime that we get on our overdraft. So at that point in time, council will be able to make a decision as to what rate they would like to apply to this loan.
All right, and I recall it being somewhere, a repay of somewhere around, on the initial amount of around 157,000 a year over 20 years that they were able to.
That was on the original 2.5 with
Right.
the interest rates as they were 2 years ago.
Right.
Obviously, they have gone up a bit, so.
So what assurance do we have that the repayment schedule, even based on the interest rates we discussed, the ones we were receiving, that the Airport Commission is able to repay based on the additional funds involved now?
Well, that was part of the cash flow analysis that Councillor Moffat was referring to.
Yes.
Because the airport, basically their revenue has to pay their principal and interest. And
I
as
guess
it stands
my
right
question
now,
is, do they have the ability to pay a greater amount than what was suggested earlier?
yes,
Is the ability there on the books?
yes.
And then thirdly, is this contingent upon Perry Sound providing their 700 on the additional 1.4?
The request
motion-
has gone to Perry Sound for their
Yes.
700,000. I believe it's coming to their council tomorrow night. I
So-
understand that there is a report that is recommending that Perry Sound advance the money. So we'll see.
Could we amend this motion, Mayor, to make it so that it's contingent upon Perry Sound passing that additional money at their upcoming meeting, just to cover ourselves? Pass it with that condition?
I personally think it would be premature because they will be discussing it tomorrow night. If we need
Yeah,
to,
but are we being asked to decide this tonight?
yes, we are, because
Well-
it's very time sensitive.
Well, okay, well, that would be premature of us, as far as I'm concerned, to approve an amount where the equal amount isn't guaranteed yet, of the offsetting other half. So I don't think it's premature to ask for an amendment to make it conditional to Perry Sound's acceptance of the additional debt or the additional money. I'd like to move that amendment and see where it goes.
Okay, we have a motion to amend it to say conditional on Perry Sound. Is there anyone that wants to second that? 1 second, okay. Counselor Moffat,
And could I speak to that motion once more?
yes, go ahead.
This amendment is only to safeguard our position financially on the condition that and once Perry Sound approves their portion, then it becomes moot. It's just a protection for us. Thank you.
Just let me get it down. Okay, so that's moved. Okay, I see a question from Counselor Fellner. And you can speak to the original motion and the amendment.
I had my hand up before our counselor put together his motion, so I'll save my comment till after we deal with his motion. If that's all right.
Okay, I'm going to read the motion with the amendment, and then we'll call a vote on that. So the motion is that as per the recommendation of staff report number TR 2022-011, the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby authorize an increase of the $700,000 to the existing approved $2.5 million loan to the Perry Sound Area Municipal Airport for the runway project, conditional on similar commitment from the town of Perry Sound.
Sorry, you're only voting on the proposed amendment, not the whole resolution.
Okay, so,
That's fine. That sounds good. Yeah.
but the clerk has clarified that we are only voting right now on the amendment.
Yes.
Okay, so Counselor Fellner, you have a question or comment on the amendment?
Not on the amendment, no. I'd like to vote on the amendment, then I have a comment.
Okay, and Counselor Moffat, your hand's up. Is that related to the amendment?
Yes, I actually asked a similar question to Michelle earlier, noting that if the town of Perry Sound did not approve, we would be back next council meeting and having to bump it up to 3.9 from 3.2. And I thought it would be best if we just topped it up. And I believe Councillor Osborne's amendment sort of reflects that same thought process. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll call a vote on the amendment to making it conditional on $700,000 coming from the town of Perry Sound. All in favor of that amendment? That's 2. So that is not carried. So we're back. Okay, just a second, defeated. So we are back to the original motion that is in the staff report. And do you want me to read it again? No, okay, but now Counselor Fellner has a comment on the original motion. Go ahead,
I
Councillor Fellner.
I think that what everybody needs to take in consideration here is that the additional funds required to complete are completely been driven by the fuel index, cost of fossil fuels. You got to keep in consideration the revenue of the township or the revenue of the airport will increase dramatically. Because most of the services they provide is driven by fuel prices. So that was my only comment there. So I'm fairly comfortable that they're going to be able to repay this loan. That's my comment. So
Thank you. And don't forget, the airport is an asset in Seguin. So yes, revenue comes to us from growth. Councillor Osborne.
I'd like to request a recorded vote, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll read the motion once again. That as per the recommendation of staff report TR 2022-011, the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby authorize an increase of $700,000 to the existing approved $2.5 million loan to the Parry Sound Area Municipal Airport for the runway project. Give this back to you.
Councillor Moffat,
Yay.
Councillor Collins is absent. Councillor Fellner,
yay.
Councillor Finson,
Yay.
Councillor Coles,
Yay.
Councillor Osborne,
Nay.
Mayor McDermott.
Yay. That is carried. Thank you very much. And now I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby support the correspondence to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, from very. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, my mic wasn't on. Sorry. That the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby support the correspondence to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, from various construction associations attached to this resolution as Schedule A regarding inflationary impacts to public infrastructure projects, and that this resolution be copied to the Ontario Ministers of Finance, Infrastructure, and Transportation, the President of the Treasury Board, the Honorable Graydon Smith, MPP, Parry Sound, Muskoka, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the various construction associations of the original correspondence. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner
So moved.
and seconded by Councillor Finson?
I second that.
And all in favor of endorsing this correspondence? This is related to what we were talking about at the airport and every other project. All in favor, thank you. Okay. Motion that as per the recommendation of staff report number DPS-PL-2022-106, the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby direct staff to prepare revised shoreline alteration bylaws drafted on Seguin's Township's Environment First Principle, the results of the public survey and engagement exercise, and the understanding that these bylaws must be reasonable, legally enforceable, and effective in their implementation, and that these revised shoreline alteration bylaws be shared on letsconnectseguin.ca for public consultation and review before council considers adopting final bylaws. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat
I so move that motion, Mayor.
and seconded by Councillor Osborne?
Second that.
I think it's a comprehensive staff report. Are there any questions? Councillor Osborne, did I see your hand up?
Yes, yes, Mayor, you did. So this was authored by Taylor, was it?
I
Yes.
believe it's a combination of Taylor and
Taylor
Valerie.
LG and Valerie Ivanovich. Oh, okay. Just a comment here. And on page 181, at this first phase of the public engagement, staff are satisfied with these results. And the results of the survey, from what I can understand, I understand it was sent out on Facebook, Instagram, lake associations, et cetera, When I look at the pie chart here on the responses, it consistently looks like there was only 38 responses to this survey, which went out to bodies of people in the thousands, or at least some associations and individuals, and there was only, I believe, one contractor that responded. So I guess my question is, and I don't want this to sound derogatory, but how can staff feel that this is, a good result based on a very limited number of responses, with all due respect? Thank you.
Taylor, do you want to reply to that?
Certainly. Through your worship. So this is the first phase of public engagement. We're hopeful we'll get more comments once we have bylaws drafted. This was more issues identification at this stage, and it was just under 40 people who participated in the survey, but other people did post questions on the website, as well as I believe it's Schedule B has several submissions by lake associations and some contractors. So there were multiple forms of involvement, but at the early stages, what we were satisfied with wasn't so much the amount of people that participated, but some of the concerns we heard and some of the topics that we heard discussed.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Taylor, but I only see the MLA and I believe Lakeville North. I'm not sure if there were other associations that commented. I would have thought that they would have jumped on this and gone in with both feet, making their views known. And I'm just wondering if it reached the appropriate people, or maybe the next phase of the survey will end up in a better result, better participation. But wow, it just seems weak to me, a response, and no fault to you guys. You did your job, but where are the people? I guess is my question.
I'm going to ask our Chief Administrative Officer to weigh in a little bit here.
Thank you, Worship. To your point, Councillor Osborne, this is really in the very, very early stages of exploration around this bylaw. I think Director Elgie outlined it just perfectly. When we put something out there that's got some meat on the bones, you can expect those numbers to climb rather rapidly, I suspect. But given that this was very, very preliminary, very early stages, we chose to report back to council with our findings, so the council was in the know, and to keep awareness to this bylaw development out in the public. So while it may seem as though only 40 responses was weak, I would suggest that as more meat gets added to the bones here, you will see participation rise, and we will get more and more comment in the months to come.
And what would the, thank you, Jason, for that. What would the window be for the next tally, so to speak? Like, we talking late August, September?
I'll let Taylor weigh in here.
Okay.
Our proposed timeframe at this stage is we're going to start drafting the bylaw and the bylaws, I should say, and hope to have them posted up until September through November, maybe December. That's when there'll be continual public engagements, the round two, so to speak. Winter 2023 would be the anticipated time for a decision on this project, and hopefully new bylaws by that stage.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Moffat.
Thank you, Mayor. I think everyone recognizes that we've had some hiccups with our bylaws with respect to this, and I think this is great. And we need, it would have been nice to move it quicker, faster, sooner, but I think this is a great start. And regardless of the input, we need to take the next steps and move it forward. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Taylor and Valerie, for the work you've done so far. I have a couple of concerns though, and I on page 5 of the report, it says it's not a matter of more controls, but more education and enforcement. And I guess how do you educate and enforce if people are unaware of the bylaws? We have bylaws in place now that people are unaware of. I have 2 cases which I've sent to staff currently in my ward where there's waterfront action going on that's inappropriate. And I believe most of it's out of ignorance. People just don't know. And I've said this to the mayor on a couple of occasions on other surveys. I honestly believe in order to create a bylaw, that there's no point in having a bylaw if people don't know it exists, number one. In order to create a bylaw that people know about, it needs to go out in their tax bill. So everybody gets a copy of it. Everybody understands. I know we all think everybody's going to go to the internet, but first of all, there's a lot of seniors in our area. Some of them don't even have the internet, so they will never go there, let alone go to their website. So put it right in front of them. Send it with their tax bill so they see what we're proposing and have a chance, and even some feedback options. So, self-addressed envelopes or whatever with it. That's my thoughts, because I know it's frustrating for everybody, but I know that lake associations are on top of this stuff, but in my case, in Otter Lake, as an example, the lake association represents about 1/3 of the residents on the lake. So what have we got? We've got the opinion of one group, but not the opinion of the people living in the ward. So those are just my comments. Thanks for the hard work you guys do, though. I know it's sometimes it's thankless, but keep it up.
I see you have your hand up, Councillor Fellner, but I think our Chief Administrative Officer would like to weigh in here.
Thank you, Worship. Just to your point, Councillor Coles, on page 5 of the report, just to be clear that the line that states they note that the Township of Seguin and builders do a good job of protecting the environment, and further protection is not a matter of more controls, but more education enforcement. That is from the Muskoka Stakeholders Association. That's not from your staff, just so that we're all on the same page.
Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Fellner.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. No, again, Taylor, thank you. And Valerie, I think this is a great first start. I know it's much needed. I think hopefully we're going to get a lot more input from the residents. I myself, I think I would like to see at some point in time, to Councillor Coles's point, that some hard copy is mailed with the tax bill. There should be no reason for people not to understand what the bylaws are. And ignorance is only a defense so long. So again, thanks again for the hard work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I would echo those comments, but I hope that the hard copy of this bylaw, or the bylaws that we're looking for input on, also goes to 100% of the landscapers and contractors who work in our area, because they're often the ones that claim ignorance. So if we mail to them, they will get their chance to speak. I think it's important. So we have a motion on the table to accept the staff report. All in favor of moving to the next step? Thank you. And that's carried. Good luck, Taylor and Valerie. I have a motion that bylaw number 2022-072, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement to grant Hydro One an easement for part of Lot 34, Concession 1, former Township of Christie, now Township of Seguin, Part A and B, PSR 2153, to provide and maintain infrastructure that supplies electrical power to various properties, including a site operated by Bell Canada for a telecommunications tower, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Fellner
So moved.
and seconded by Councillor Finson?
I second that.
Who's going to speak to this? Tom? Tom, I see you on the screen. Do you want to explain a little bit what this is?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Your Worship and members of council. This is just kind of a tidy up agreement. There's a piece of property just off of Elsasser Road. It's about half a kilometer from Allen Crescent. There's some infrastructure that Hydro would like to just formalize in a parcel, identified as a parcel. And all it is 3 guide poles, main pole, and it's outside on, if there's ever future development, it won't be in the way. So it's just a tidy up easement is all.
Does anybody have any questions for Director McLeod? I see none. All in favor? Thank you. And now we move to the addendum issue that was raised by Councillor Moffat. I will read this. Whereas Rail Safety Week is to be held across Canada from September 19th to 25th, 2022. And whereas it is in the public's interest to raise citizens' awareness of the dangers of ignoring safety warnings at level crossings and trespassing on rail property to reduce avoidable deaths, injuries, and damage caused by incidents involving trains and citizens. And whereas Operation Lifesaver is a public-private partnership whose aim is to work with the public, rail industry, governments, police services, medias, and others to raise rail safety awareness. And whereas CN has requested Council adopt this resolution in support of its ongoing efforts to raise awareness, save lives, and prevent injuries in communities, including in our municipality. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby support National Rail Safety Week to be held from September 19th to 25th, 2022. Could I have a motion from Councillor Moffat?
I so move that motion, Mayor. Thank you.
And seconded by Councillor Coles.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor? Thank you. Oh, and this also came in your addendum. A motion that bylaw number 2022-078, being a bylaw to appoint an acting deputy clerk for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin, Donna McLeod, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Osborne?
So moved.
And seconded by Councillor Fellner.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Thank you, and that is carried. Congratulations, Donna. I think you're already doing it. Council reports. Could we start with Councillor Moffat and Ward?
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see. It was pretty quiet couple of weeks, I guess. We had our barbecue, our council barbecue back on the 23rd. I attended the Wellness Center meeting on the 28th. That was a very lively discussion that occurred on a few matters. Also attended the, as you and I were there, the Canada Day celebrations at the Foley Community Center, and it was good to see all the kids and people out. I think donations topped around $200. So we had a good barbecue, and the weather was a little cool. Not enough wind though for the kites that they were making, which was unfortunate, but they had a lot of fun. And just several emails on several planning matters, some commercial zoning stuff. Our potential water park has been, I think, a little more active over the past weekend, similar to the May 2-4 weekend, just due to volume of people and a lot of discussion on that. So it's been more busy on the residents front over the last few days. That's it on my end. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Mayor. And it's again, it has been maybe not quite as busy, but it's still pretty busy. June 21st, we redid the Belvedere sign. If for those of you who've been by Belvedere, the management committee has created a sign out front to thank the staff for their work and endurance during the pandemic, and it needed to be refreshed. So we did that this week, putting up a new sign, which is bright and beautiful, and painted the framework. So June 22nd was a Belvedere Heights management meeting. And again, all is good. We're keeping within our fiscal means, and expect to have some funds left over again at the end of the year, which obviously go to our reserves. 23rd, I was at the staff luncheon along with most of the rest of us. Then I believe it was the 24th, one day that week anyway, I can't remember the date. I met with Tom McLeod on Spring Lane, one of our newly created year-round roads to deal with some flooding issues. There's one of the residents there. Tom has, I believe, got it already done, which to his credit, the work that was required. And then this morning I toured our new Clear Lake Estates project that is, I hope, coming to council at our next meeting. What I can say about it is that it's a spectacular road. They've done an amazing job of constructing the road to the standards that we provided them with. And it is very well done. And I think anybody that's going to be in it, as you know, the project is sold out, and there's a couple of portages in it. They changed the portage from the original location, but they've also created a new one from a couple of different locations within the project itself. So it's an exciting project. And then on Canada Day, of course, Otter Lake had its Otter Lake Boat Regatta, which is an exciting event where all the boaters tour the lake and flying flags, and everybody's on their docks watching. It's a very good day. That's mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
I attended a Rosso Nursing Station meeting about a week and a half ago. We've got another one tomorrow at 2 p.m. to discuss some current issues. And as well, I'd like to once again mention that the membership of the committee is short by 3 or 4 people. I have a CPAC meeting coming up on the 27th, OPP. Other than that, I've been reporting to staff more alterations of our shoreline on Turtle Lake. I've got 3 now and growing. It's a shame, but it's got to stop somewhere. Hopefully, Valerie and Taylor can help us on that. That's all I have to report. Thank you. Oh, one other thing. I tried to get on the Wellness Center meeting. I tried my darndest through the Town of Paris Sound website, through the link that was sent by the mayor to me. And I went on YouTube. I just could not see that meeting. So if anyone has an easy way to get to it, I'd like to see it. Thanks.
I believe if you contact Rebecca at Perry Sound, you'll be able to watch the recording of that meeting. But it was a direct Zoom link. I don't think YouTube's involved, but I'm not sure. But
yeah, I tried their site. It's not even on their site. The last meeting was like 19. That's on their site. It's pretty old. Yeah. Well,
I do suggest you call Rebecca Johnson. She'll tell you exactly where it is. She acts as the liaison.
Thanks, Matt.
Councillor Fellner.
Thank you, Mayor. I as well attended the staff barbecue. It was a good day, good afternoon, I guess. I attended the pool wellness meeting last week. I believe that's the third meeting we held. Important things to note is now we formally have a contract with a project management firm to to initiate the next steps so we can get going actually with the process. A little disappointed that the board didn't see fit to endorse some of the recommendations of the fundraising committee, but it is what it is. Been working a lot the last few weeks with Parks and Rec. We've been making some pretty good progress out on the Seguin Trail, cutting back all the trees and the rock cuts, restoring the ditches, that type of thing. It's coming along very well. We're out past Orville now and anticipate winding that phase up in the next week or so. Trail seems to be getting more and more use. We had it graded the first 5 kilometers as well, so it should be back into good working order after the winter, spring. And also had Dominique had a Zoom meeting last week with interested participants from the South Seguin Snowmobile Club, Park to Park, and other interest groups, trail interest groups, for a discussion about possible enhancements to the trailhead that we have on Black Road. So all pretty favorable. So moving along very well. Had no other meetings. I had, I did. I had a museum meeting as well that I attended. And I have an upcoming committee of adjustments meeting. So that's it for me. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Finson.
Hi. I had a cemetery meeting, which went well as usual and fairly quick. Our museum meeting was canceled because there wasn't enough people to attend it. The RCAC has successfully put up the welcome banners in Rosso, and they look fabulous. We're hoping to get more. They did 10 banners, and they're hoping to get another 10 in our, maybe for next year. We're not sure when we'll get them. We've also, well, I didn't do it, but my husband arranged to have some more banners put up down at the waterfront. So he's got the arms and is working on, he's got enough people to go onto those banners as well for the fall. Just fielding a few phone calls, and we'll tune in to watch that YouTube video of the Wellness Center meeting because I also missed it, not intentionally. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I don't have too much, but June 21st was National Indigenous Peoples Day. And as you may know, the summer solstice. So I attended the Foley Whispering River concert for the summer solstice. There were native drummers there as well. It was quite a moving evening as the sun went down. And I counted at least 85 people there, but people were coming and going and sitting outside. It was a lovely evening to sit and listen to classical music and Indian drummers. The 23rd, as many of you have mentioned, was the staff barbecue, and I think we fed quite a few hungry people. We have learned that veggie burgers are not popular with our staff, so we will cut the order of veggie burgers in the future. That evening, Mayor McGarvey hosted the board members of AMO at the Stocky Center, and I attended as one of the regional mayors. It was a lovely dinner. And that evening as well, we had a meeting of the fundraising committee of the pool. On June 28th, we had an airport operations meeting, and that was followed by lunch with the Airport Commission and our new member of Parliament, Graydon Smith, who spent some time talking about the airport, but then he went on a tour of Seguin with Bruce Hatherley from Gordon Bay. They visited Croft Industries, they visited Crofters, drove around to some of our resorts, because we feel pretty strongly that our new member of parliament needs to have a presence in the Parry Sound part of his constituency. So we will continue to invite him regularly. That evening was a formal event at the Parry Sound Golf Club to thank Norm Miller for his years of service. And I had to leave a little bit early to go to the Municipal Services Board for the Wellness Center, but MPP Yakubowski was the master of ceremonies and absolutely hilarious. If you ever need a MP for, or a MC for an event, he had the room hooting and hollering of events. And yes, the Municipal Services Board met on the 28th, and Richard Culverwell and I, who are the co-chairs of the fundraising committee, made a presentation. We were disappointed that basically, as Councillor Fellner said, they didn't accept our recommendations, but we're not giving up yet. What they did was refer them back to the steering committee, which is made up of the CAOs. And we have some work to do to get the steering committee completely on our side. And I think Jason summed it up well, is that the Municipal Services Board and the construction part of the pool is moving very, very slowly. And the fundraising committee is moving very, very fast. And the two timelines are not melding yet. So we need to work on that. June 29th, I was surprised not to see any of you on the All Candidates Information Zoom meeting that was held by the clerks of the 7 municipalities. So that happened. I think you can watch it again. I saw Colby put it up on our website. So I think there was some important information and a few changes from previous years. July 1st, I attended the Rosso Market for Canada Day, and it was booming. And our 2 bylaw officers were there, struggling to keep cars out of the market area. And they now have a new assistant called Dog Treats that they feed to all the dogs, so the dogs at the market don't fight with each other. So they were all hanging around our bylaw officers, but you might see an expense item for a big bag of dog treats for the Rosso Market. And that also was the day of the Foley Canada Day. And there were races and barbecue and kite making. So our townships did celebrate Canada Day in a pretty big way. So that's all I have. And now I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby receive the board and committee minutes and agendas and the correspondence as presented on the agenda and addendum for July 4th, 2022 meeting of council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson?
I so move.
And seconded by Councillor Moffat.
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
All in favor? Thank you. And I have a motion that bylaw number 2022-077, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of meetings of council, is hereby deemed to have been read a first, second, and third time and passed by council. Could I have a motion from Councillor Coles?
I also move.
And seconded by Councillor Osborne.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. And that's carried. And I have a motion that the Council of the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn this regular meeting of council at 6:24 p.m. To meet again on Monday, July 18th, 2022, or at the call of the mayor. Could I have a motion from Councillor Finson?
So move.
And seconded by Councillor Moffat.
I'll second that motion, Mayor.
All in favor? Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening and travel safely.